Sit back and grow your Ringgit sense. This program is powered by Ringgit Plus.
Hello and welcome to Ringgit Sense Plus. I'm your host, Azaria Tagaya. It's just a few hours now from the end of the year. Now, this is typically the time where people get to writing their New Year's resolutions. To lose weight, to go on a holiday, or to start a hobby. Now, these are just some of the usual resolutions we normally hear about. Well, what about setting a resolution relating to your personal finances? Well, we spoke to licensed financial planners and asked them what would be the ideal financial goals either for those who are single as well as for couples with children. Now, let's take a look at the single person first. Well, we came up with a financial model of a single person who is 25 years old, earning 2,500 ringgit and has been working for about 2 to 4 years. He or she is renting a room in the Klang Valley and takes public transportation to work. Now, let's assume this single person also does not have any savings or insurance. So what should their short-term goal for 2019 be? Well, if this sounds like you, pay attention, as this may help you avoid major mistakes later in life.
We met with two licensed financial planners. They did some conservative calculations and found that even after removing expenses such as room rental, food, and even gym fees, our model person should have some money left over monthly.
Somebody who actually earns 2,500 a month should still be able to have about close to 900 ringgit available once you deduct all of those expenses. So the fact that a lot of people say, oh, we're single, we're only earning below 2,500, that we don't have sufficient money, to me that is actually misleading, because it's actually dependent on how you spend it instead of spending it the way you would like to.
I identify that most of the time they face this issue basically because they cannot stop their hands from putting inside the accounts and make withdrawal that is unplanned for. And to avoid this, it's very simple. You just have to separate your savings from your day-to-day cash account.
According to Kevin, the problem isn't how much you earn, but more with how you spend.
A person making 2,500, they will complain that their earnings is low. A person earning 5,000 will say the same thing. So it comes back to the person yourself. What kind of lifestyle are you living? So when you make complaints that your income is low, look at your own lifestyle. Are you really spending money a lot that is avoidable? Or are you really try your best to save, to cut expenses, but you still couldn't maintain a very basic lifestyle? If you couldn't, then that would be a problem. But most of the time, they are actually able to still chase after their desired lifestyle.
Once you have surplus money, the next thing to do is to buy health and life insurance for yourself.
In the short term, because this person doesn't have insurance, either life or medical, they might have insurance from their employer, but I still think that having your own personal medical insurance is very important. Because if something were to happen to you, you're being retrenched by your employer, then you still can go back to your own personal. And actually, the cost of taking a medical insurance, especially a standalone medical plan right now, is actually not that expensive. You can get one as low as 52 ringgit a month, which is doable. So instead of maybe 3 or 4 frappuccinos at Starbucks, you can use it to pay your monthly medical standalone card. This person can then look into taking basic life insurance and TPD coverage. Also, you can look it up online. For 100,000, term policy is only about 17 ringgit 50 cents a month. So it's not expensive. So if we equate it to the Starbucks frappuccino, it's like 1 venti frappuccino.
With the surplus money, you can also start putting aside money for short-term and long-term goals that you may have, like getting married.
If I do a simple calculation, if you want to put aside 30,000 ringgit for your wedding. So it's a very simple wedding. It might be in a hall instead of a hotel with catered food, with not a lot of basic dog gifts and everything. It might cost you about 30 to 40,000.
If buying a home is your long-term goal, this 25-year-old person can now get a 100% guaranteed loan for homes under 400,000 ringgit, so you don't have to save up for the down payment. However, you still have to make sure your expenses are low enough so that a bank will approve your loan. At this stage, it's important to start thinking about investments and how to make your money grow for your eventual retirement.
If you don't put your money to work for you, eventually you will find that you have to spend more and more just to maintain the same quality of lifestyle. But before you invest, it's very important to make sure you first have savings, because if anything unexpected, you would want to prevent making withdrawal from your investment account. Because what if at that moment your investment account is making a loss? If you don't have any backup plans or means, right, you have no choice but to realize all those losses, and that'll be very sayang.
In this scenario, for this person, if we actually assume a 5% increment on a year-to-year basis, by the time they reach 60 years old, they will have about 800,000 in their EPF account, assuming they didn't take out a single cent for anything. So that means they can live with about 4,000 a month, including inflation, for the next 20 years, which is, I wouldn't say it's comfortable, but it's still something compared to most of the people who do not have anything. But if they then have the resources, because they've been managing their finances properly, they should be able to add on to their retirement, and the more that they add to retirement, the more they'll have for their retirement later.
Now, if you find that even after all the cuts you've made in your monthly budget, you still can't afford to invest money monthly, then start investing in knowledge.
The best thing they can do right now at this age, right, is to invest in themselves. If you look at it, right, nowadays we have a lot of job or a lot of work that maybe 10 years or 5 years ago, we didn't even know that it would exist. So it's important for us to constantly upgrade ourselves in terms of our skill set, in terms of our knowledge. And you have to always question yourself, what is the purpose of you being exist in this world? Find something that you care about, a problem, then you find a way to solve it. Sometimes when you do this, you realize that you might just happen to create a business opportunity for yourself. So if you are not the entrepreneur type of person, then you have to look for opportunity or career that can help you to grow. You can actually have a discussion with your management to review your performance, to consider whether you are suitable to transfer to another department that you like, or to promote yourself.
Nobody knew who was Bill Clinton back then.
Well, if you want to share the interview you just watched with other singles who have just started in their careers, you can go to our Facebook page to find it. After the break, we asked the financial planners their suggestions on what financial goals couples with children should be setting for themselves. Now, if you have children, stick around to learn more. Welcome back to Plus. You're still with me, Azaria Tagaya. If you've just joined us, we're talking about setting financial goals as your New Year's resolutions. Earlier, we looked at singles and how they should be planning their future finances. So what about those who are married and raising kids? Well, we came up with a model family. A couple, both 30 years old, and have a joint income of 7,000 ringgit. Now, they have two children, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. They're still renting an apartment in the Klang Valley. Now, both parents have been working for about 8 years. What if they still have no savings, no insurance, or education fund for their kids? Well, we know some of you may be in the same situation as this family. So if you want to know what to do, listen to what the experts have to say.
We asked Rafiq Hidayat and Felix Neo, both licensed financial planners, to look through the financial model of the family. According to Rafiq, after deducting the cost of living, including car loan, apartment rental, daycare fees for both children and other expenses, they should still have some money left over.
Even if I take that into account, the couple still has about 600 to 700 a month lying around extra in excess. This also taking into account that they're still giving to their parents, all the expenses of the family has been taken care of, just they're not putting anything aside for investments. But the question I would have to this couple, so if we're working 5 to 8 years and you have this kind of surplus, where did your surplus go to? Because is it the fact that, yes, you have the surplus, but because you choose to pay yourself later instead of pay yourself first, that's why the surplus is not existent. That's why you don't have any investments, you don't have your education funding, you don't have your insurance for you and your family. So that's a question that the couple needs to ask themselves.
This couple needs to find ways to cut their cost of living or find ways to raise their income so that they have surplus cash at the end of the month. Then they can start thinking about insurance for themselves and their kids.
These are family with young children and they don't have insurance. So it's very dangerous because they have young children relying on them. So they have to first think about how, assuming they already have a pool of family savings, it will be very important for them to find ways to protect their savings because their savings could mean everything for their family goals. So to do that, they have to at least ensure the parents are covered with personal accident policy as well as hospitalization policy.
They can still afford to take medical insurance because with the additional surplus, they should focus on taking medical insurance because the cost is actually around the same. So for a family with a standalone medical card, it might be about 220, 230 per month for the whole family, which is still within their surplus.
Once they have insurance, they can start thinking about the long-term goal of buying a home of their own instead of renting.
They can afford a house that costs about below 400,000. So, but I understand that the profile of this couple, they are staying in an apartment. So apartment rental on a monthly basis should fetch about 1,000 to below 1,400. So that means if they can buy a house that is also commensurate with this mortgage installment, right, then they would not have any incremental expenses.
They can go opt for the cheaper houses, even your like the rumah Selangorku and everything below 300,000, which is about 1,300 a month, which they should be able to afford to because their expenses are not increasing.
The first step they can try is, since they are renting, why not try to discuss with the current landlord to see whether the landlord has any intention of letting go of this unit or not. If can, then they can try to take over. Because they have been working for 5 to 8 years, they should have a sizable savings that is enough to fund for the down payment. If not, they will also have their EPF account to rely on. But I would suggest that let's leave that out of the picture first, because that is actually money meant for retirement.
You also shouldn't depend only on your EPF for your retirement. Start putting money aside for your own retirement fund as well.
At just the age of 30, assuming they retire according to the mandatory age, which is 60 years old, they have a 30 years time frame. Just putting aside, let's say, 10% of their current income, 350 per person. Let's say if that is too high, just start from 100, and then the next year, you increase by 10%, and when you have an increment, when you have a bonus, make a commitment to, let's say, set aside half of whatever bonus you are getting, throw it into your retirement portfolio. Over time, because of compounding interest and all these things, right, your portfolio should grow.
For many families who don't have much to invest each month, they have to make the hard choice. Do they save for their children's education fund or their own retirement fund?
Taking all that into account, so now the parents would have a choice they have to make with regards to, do I put money aside for my kids' education or do I put money aside for my retirement?
It's very common we cannot afford both because both are big ticket items. I would just say that my personal point of view, we can borrow money for education, but we cannot borrow any money for retirement. So you have to ask yourself which is more important. If you insist to prepare for a very good education for your children, just for the sake of being a good parent, you have to ask yourself, what if after you retire and when you are old, you have to pass the ball back to your child to take care of you? Does this mean that you are being a good father or mother? I don't think so. So you have to really juggle between very well. It's a very thin line.
At this point of time, the way I usually discuss with my clients is first what they can afford and what comes first. So in this case, in this particular case, the one that comes first is the kids' education. So because the retirement is still 30 years away, whereas the kids' education is 13 and 16 years away. So you can still focus your resources on the kids' education. Then after the kids have gone for their tertiary education, you still have at least 15 to 14 years in order to focus on your retirement, to supplement whatever it is that you have in your EPF amount.
As a couple, the husband and wife should sit down and start writing out their financial goals together. Once you know your priorities, you can work backwards from there.
We know there are many families out there struggling to control their finances, so we hope the interview earlier was useful to you. Drop by our Facebook page and let us know what you thought about the interviews you watched earlier. We're going for a short break. After this, we have more tips on setting your New Year's resolutions. See you after the break. Back on Ringgit Cents Plus with me, Azaria Tagaya. We're closer to the end of the year and we're talking about setting financial goals for next year. So what are some of the goals that you should be setting? Should you buy a car or not? Should it be a new car, or would looking at second-hand car options be more beneficial for the long term? Well, we put these questions to our panel of licensed financial advisors.
According to licensed financial planner Kevin Neo, those with a family probably can't escape getting a car to bring their kids around, so they should look at buying a used car.
I would suggest they start from shopping around under the secondary market instead of jump straight into buying a new car.
My view with regards to changing a car, unless you're really good at looking at the cars, especially the second-hand market, to find the good deals, or you have a mechanic that you really can trust, I would still prefer going for new cars, but the cheaper alternatives instead of the more expensive versions. Because even when you buy the cheaper alternatives, it's still new. It doesn't come with the same headaches, and it's still under warranty. So if anything were to happen, you can just send it back to the product manufacturer, and then they'll take care of it. Whereas if you buy second-hand cars, you have to then manage the headaches yourself.
According to Han Liu, the CEO of Ringgit Plus, before writing out your goals, find out what makes you really happy. This will help decide your priorities in life.
I mean, the most important thing is to figure out what's going to make you happy, right? As in, obviously, we're not here to say, oh, you need to be married and you need to have kids, you need to have a big house, etc., etc. But you've got to figure out for your own self what makes you happy. And why I say that is because that will guide you to achieving whatever goals you set. So here's an example, right? If you decide, okay, what makes me happy is I want to be married with kids in a house, or either that or I don't want to be that. I want to travel the world once a year. That's the first thing to do, which is to have a self-reflection of what makes you happy, right? Then after that, it's about just focusing on three golden things, three golden rules on just going about those life goals, which is first, will I have enough wealth or savings, whichever you want to call it, to achieve those things, right? So wealth or savings is one big part of that. Whether it's a saving account, or whether it's building wealth through property purchases, or whether it's making smart investments, wealth becomes a key component of setting that life goal, right? I want to build X wealth. The second part of it is income, right? Paying for things is one thing with your wealth, but being able to sustain it over time is, what is the income level do I need to have that life I want in 5 years' time, when I'm 35, when I'm 35, 40, etc. Do I have the right skill sets? Do I have the right career trajectory to increase my income to a stage where it can support those life goals. And the third and lesser known one in terms of golden rules to think about is insurance. Accidents happen. Illnesses happen, right? That may derail or, throw chaos into the first two things, right? And while it feels like an expense today, insurance is actually an important part of that life goal planning. Key thing to think about is the first thing is I need to build my wealth, right? And I need to have emergency savings as well. It's not just insurance. It's like sometimes you just in a pinch, you need some cash. So that's what savings accounts and FDs are for. That's what cash is for. But most financial experts argue that cash is probably the worst investment you can make. So cash is for those situations where unexpected happens. But beyond that, say you've covered 3 to 6 months of your usual income in cash, it's about making smart investments and going up that risk profile. So you go, okay, I've started with cash. What's a little bit more risky than cash? I will go up that risk profile. It could be bonds. It could be properties, depending on the type of property you're buying, whether it's investment related or not. Then it's about going beyond that risk profile from where you're comfortable, right? And because as a young person, you want to be able to take some risks, but you want to make sure that you've got your downside covered.
Han also adds that when planning ahead for the whole year, make sure your income supports what you want to achieve and watch out for the peak spending periods like festivals.
The two things to really think about when you're making kind of goals for financial, your financial, I don't say plan, but financial lifestyle is two main things. The first is, do I have not so much the wealth part, but do I have sufficient income to be able to sustain my family's daily, monthly, yearly needs? So that's just the first thing. Income becomes the more important thing than just savings and wealth. And two, watch the bumps. What does that mean? So typically families have a different spending profile than single people. What do I mean by that? Families have festive commitments. They have things like birthdays, very one-off commitments throughout the year, which when people do a budget, they don't really plan for. They look at their monthly budget and assume it just stabilizes over the year. In reality, for families, it's bumpy. So the second thing to think about, other than just making sure I've got enough income, is watch the bumps, right? And plan for the bumps over the year. Once you watch the bumps, what do? Even out the bumps, right? Which is, okay, I've got Chinese New Year, Raya, Christmas every year, right? I spend X ringgit. While I don't think about it in my monthly planning, it's about summing all that up, dividing by 12 and adding it to my monthly budget. It's not a monthly thing, I don't spend it a month, but I have to account for it by smoothing out those bumps.
When you're young and you get your first salary, it's always tempting to spend it on a new handphone or a holiday. Keep in mind the idea of delayed gratification. Putting off paying for what is nice today will pay off for something greater in the future.
It's important to have a goal for whatever we are doing, but sometimes a good goal can be empowering, but there are goals that are not so good one. It's not good for you to even think about it. For example, if you are earning 2,500, you can dream about buying a car that is cost you about 100,000. The bank may approve your loan, but it doesn't mean that you can really afford it. So you have to think long term a little bit. You have to understand that whatever decision I make today, how it will affect my tomorrow and the future. Then ask yourself whether that picture is that something you like or not. If you don't like the outcome, then that means your decision today, you have to review it.
Well, we hope the tips in today's episode will go a long way in changing your personal finances for the better. If you want to share today's interview with others, find us on Facebook and YouTube. We have more personal finance tips that will change your life. I'm Azaria Tagaya signing off, and we'll see you in 2019. Have a great year-end celebration, and always remember to invest and save wisely.
Tune Tune in next week and visit ringgitplus.com today for more Ringgit wisdom. This show is brought to you by Ringgit Plus.